All right, well, it's 8:01, so let's get started because I have to get to clinic myself today. Welcome everyone to our April PI coordinator call for Combine. We were hoping to deliver much of this content in person in Orlando last week, but obviously that did not happen. So I'm thankful that many of you are able to join us this morning. And as a reminder, we will have a repeat performance of this on Thursday. But if you're here this morning, there's no reason to come on Thursday as well. It will be exactly the same content presented as a rerun. Next slide. So our agenda today, a bit of a recruitment update. Next, I will share with you a high-level summary of the data that we shared with the Data Safety and Monitoring Board last month. A short update about study finances and good news for all of our sites. And then we'll talk a little bit about Combine and how we are going to get through the COVID-19 together and while safely and adequately following our patients. Next slide. In terms of recruitment, 294 patients randomized as of the beginning of April, and this effort has been spread across 35 sites, so it really is a heroic effort. If it weren't for the darn COVID, we would probably be at 300 patients by now, which will be an amazing milestone when we reach it. Despite COVID, we managed to randomize 6 patients in March. So thanks to Emory, Rainbow, Dayton, CHKD, and UNC. Although unfortunately, our UNC patient got cold feet at the last minute. And amazingly, Michigan randomized or completed consent on a patient last week that I believe is still waiting to be randomized. And to the extent that that you guys are able, you can keep recruiting. We remain open for business. From the beginning of Combine, we have developed formalized processes for telephone consent. We know that many of you are operating at multiple satellite clinics, and we would like to be able to include those satellite clinic patients in Combine, and so remote consent is nothing new for Combine. And to the extent that you all are doing telehealth visits and making decisions about starting anti-TNFs, those patients are eligible for Combine. Next slide. This graph here shows our typical monthly cumulative recruitment, and it's slow and steady for the last couple of years. Hopefully, with Combine, we'll manage. Hopefully, with COVID, we'll manage to get at least 1 or 2 more months so that we won't get any further behind schedule. Next slide. And again, just as a reminder, this really is an amazing effort across all of our sites. So wherever you are on the graph, hopefully over the next couple of months, you can move either further to the left or further up in height. Next slide. So next, we're going to give some high-level summary data. These are, again, data that we presented to the Data Safety and Monitoring Board last month. I believe you all have heard from Carrie, our regulatory specialist at Cincinnati Children's, that we did get the go-ahead to continue recruitment and follow up based on our last Data Safety and Monitoring Board meeting. You can see at the bottom of this slide, at the time of this slide creation, there were 294 participants that were randomized into Combine. Of those, 124 are currently active and on study drugs. So that's 42% of the randomized patients. 50 patients are still active and in follow-up, but have stopped study drug. And you can see at the bottom here, 32 of those patients have stopped study drug because they met a primary outcome or endpoint, and according to the protocol, stopped study drug. 18 patients chose to discontinue study drug for non-medical reasons. They just were poorly adherent or changed their minds or whatever whatever is the case. And again, that kind of represents real world. You know, many of our patients decide to stop medicines for one reason or another. So I think you know, while we encourage good adherence in all of our patients, regardless of combined participation, it seems like our combined sample is mirroring the real world. 18% of patients have had a early termination, either a withdrawal or a loss to follow-up. And again, you can see at the bottom of those, 25 patients had at least a year or so of follow-up before the early termination, and you know, we're able to contribute good data to the study despite the early term. Sometimes people moved after a year or went off to college and stopped being seen regularly by their GI practice. And again, as long as patients are able to contribute at least a year, we consider that a success. Next slide. In terms of outcomes, and many of you have asked related questions over the last couple of months. So 60 patients thus far have experienced a study outcome or perhaps more than one of the study outcomes detailed below. And so that represents 21% of the randomized population. Again, as per the prior slide, many of our patients are still in follow-up. We've planned from the beginning to do an interim analysis after 76 patients meet a primary outcome, and so that should correspond to the fall. And we'll update you as we are doing and as we have results from that interim analysis. This slide here shows sort of a breakdown of the components of that primary composite outcome that patients met at the time of the first outcome. So highest on the list is discontinuing the anti-TNF for toxicity, you know, whether it be an infusion reaction or psoriasis or something else. Followed by hospitalization after week 25 or the need to discontinue study medication for toxicity. And the rest are shown here. You can see here that we have 67 first outcomes in 60 patients, and that's because many patients met 2 outcomes at the same time. For example, they failed to taper steroids and also had an elevated short pediatric Crohn's disease activity index, or they had abdominal surgery and were hospitalized at the same time. When we send you those outcome verification forms, these indicate all outcomes that sort of a patient, all first outcomes that a patient had met. We're scanning the database and trying to find sort of evidence of any outcomes, but if you know that a patient has met more than the one that we asked you to certify, please indicate and certify that as well. Next slide. And we can keep going. So in terms of follow-up visits, this slide here shows the percent of patients completing each of our required study visits over the course of the 10 visits through week 104 or through our primary 2-year period. this current table doesn't include the optional third year yet. As you can see, by definition, all patients need to have a screening visit, otherwise we would not be able to randomize them. And then we have some patients who don't complete visits as time goes on. And the sort of decrement from 100% to about 2/3 by the end of the study represents two different factors. One is the patients who we know have had a early termination. We saw a couple slides ago that's somewhere between 15 and 20%. And then the other are the patients who have not had an early term, but for some reason they just missed or skipped a visit. And by and large, if they skip one visit, hopefully we'll get them for the following visit. And again, this is something that we're going to all have to pay very close attention to over the next couple of months, as many of the sites are shifting from in-person visits to video visits or telephone visits or some other virtual visits. And we need to make sure that not only are patients getting scheduled appropriately for some sort of visit in their window, but also that we communicate as a team and that our coordinators know when and where so that we're able to report data. Next slide. You all know the consequence of missed visits, particularly patients who are on study drug but have not had a combined visit in 6 months will have their study drug shipments automatically stopped by the pharmacy. This is just a safety check that we had to implement in our system so that I'm not responsible for sending methotrexate to patients who you guys are not in regular contact with in your clinical programs. If you skip a visit, that's fine. We understand life happens, but we should at least be seeing these patients at a minimum of every 6 months or so. Hopefully you all know how to use the visit schedule report to see the patients that are in jeopardy of having their study shipments terminated. Be proactive, use that report, schedule visits as needed, even schedule a telephone visit as needed so that we can remove them from, or better yet, not add those patients to the do not ship list. Catalina and Anne and others are letting you know as patients get close to or added to that list as well. Don't wait for Catalina or Anne to reach out to you. Be more proactive than that in scheduling visits before it's too late. And of course, missed visits are a missed opportunity to check in with our combined participants to assess whether or not they've met a primary endpoint and document accordingly. The entire sample size and power for Combine is based on patients who not only meet primary endpoints but have data recorded regarding those primary endpoints. And so we really need to assess whether patients have met endpoints, when those endpoints were met, so that we can analyze data appropriately and answer our study question. And visits are also the opportunity to record concomitant medication use, assess for adverse events, serious adverse events, record lab tests and other crucial data. And also, unfortunately, when visits are missed, we need to document them on our deviation logs. So it's a lot easier to do a visit and record a visit than have to add a missed one to the deviation log. Next slide. Data completeness, we still have a lot to work on, but we've actually made really good progress on missing data. So thanks to the team for working with sites, and thanks to sites for responding to many of the queries that we've sent you. When visits happen, we've been able to recapture a lot of the labs or other data elements that seemed to have been missing. Since this slide was made, one of our other sites has returned a lot of lab values as well. And so I'm really pleased to say that the actual lab completeness is much higher than even what is reported on this slide, which is far improved from the version of the slide that we presented to you all 6 months ago. It continues to be the case that a lot of the missing data elements highlighted in yellow are the data elements that come from the Improved Care Now registry. And so we see that sites are much better at entering data into the combined case report forms than the Improved Care Now registry. That may be the case at some sites where it's a different person working on the combined case report forms versus the Improved Care Now registry. So super important if it is a different person to ensure good communication within the team. Next slide. That said, when you notice or when we query you about data that is missing from the Improved Care Now registry, there are two ways to correct and record that missing data, assuming that like a lab value, it was actually sent to the lab and measured. You can either go back and put the visit into the Improved Care Now registry. That's a great way to do it. Or on our combine forms, you all by now are aware of the supplemental data tab, and this is a short mini case report form where you can put in a physician global assessment, you can put in some of the parameters of the short pediatric Crohn's disease activity index, and you can put in the lab values that were missing. Entering one of these combined supplemental data forms should take really just a few minutes. Next slide. Study finances, and again, a bit of good news here. Next slide. So as we've mentioned earlier in the winter, our no-cost extension for an additional year has been approved by PCORI. That will allow recruitment to continue through the end of 2020 and follow-up to continue through the end of 2021. So we have a little less than a year to continue recruitment. We will see as the year goes on whether we can extend this a little bit further due to the hit that many of our sites are experiencing with COVID. Site contracts were sent out in October for the current year, year 5. Most of the sites, but not all of the sites, have executed those year 5 contracts. If you're one of the sites that has not executed its year 5 contract, you're 6 months behind in doing so. And until you execute a year 5 contract, we can't pay you for year 5. So check with your contracts, folks. Make sure that you have your year 5 contract executed. If not, bug them so that we can pay you. And as a reminder, the year 6 contracts will go out prior to October 31st. So you can be on the lookout for those in the early part of the fall. With the year 5 contract, payments have been increased. So you'll get a little bit of a bonus for the screening visit, which has gone up from the original $300 a patient to $500 a patient. And the visit 10, or the last of the 2-year follow-up visits, has increased from $80 a visit to $359 a visit. So, you know, all said, it's about a $500 increase per patient. So that should be a nice bump and go a long way towards filling some of the deficits that many combined centers have had. All of these increased payments are retroactive, and so if you enrolled 10 patients 2 years ago, you should be getting another $500 for each of those 10 patients, or $5,000, you know, as soon as possible to your signing of the contract in October. I'm told from Cincinnati that retroactive payments were sent out, were sent internally for processing on March 24th. So checks should hopefully be mailed to you all in April. So expect a nice April bonus. I guess it's your equivalent of a tax refund. Next slide. Shifting gears for our last couple slides about Combine and COVID. Next slide. We've sent a lot of this information out by email. We've held a number of open office hours in the last couple of weeks. And Anne and Kat have been reaching out to your sites to schedule one-on-one visits to just sort of think through how your site is managing COVID from a clinical perspective for all of your IBD patients, and how we can best make that work for Combine. Again, Combine was always designed as a pragmatic trial. It was always designed to be nested into your everyday clinical care delivery. COVID has thrown us all for a curve, but we still need to figure out how to make Combine flexible enough to be integrated into the new clinical reality that all of us are facing. The IRB was wonderful in sort of understanding and wanting to work with us, and has already reviewed and approved everything that we've sent to you guys, including the SOP for doing whatever we can by phone and telehealth, and even ways to new novel ways to collect patient-reported outcomes. There's a phone checklist that we sent all of you. There's an ability to do online data entry for the PROs. And again, we've always had SOPs for obtaining remote consent, which we can continue to follow during the Combine period, during the COVID period. Too many things that start with CO early in the morning. As a reminder, we are not collecting the research labs through the biobank at this time. The biobank is closed, but we still expect the standard of care clinical labs as it makes sense for you and your clinical follow-up of patients. So things like the CBC, LFT, SED-rate, CRP are still expected per protocol. As it makes sense and as you're ordering them in conjunction with telephone visits. I know for our center, we've been utilizing LabCorp quite heavily. I should have bought stock in LabCorp a month or so ago. Maybe it's not too late, I don't know. But if you're sending labs through LabCorp or some other agency, please enter those into the combined case report forms. And as mentioned, Anne and Kat are reaching out to you all for one-on-ones to go through a lot of this. Next slide. So this is a little bit about the sort of SOP for the telehealth, and a plug to follow the SOPs as well as the checklist. If you notice that anything is missing on the checklist, let us know. If you have any suggestions for version 2, let us know if you have any tools of how to work with all of the providers who are doing telehealth visits, so that they can collect and appropriately document this information in their charts so that they are available for the coordinator and site PI to review. Let us know. We wanted to get you information quickly. We know that we probably didn't get it perfectly right the first time, but in the spirit of quality improvement, we can consider the first week or two a PDSA. So please provide us the information so that we can improve this, and we're happy to do so. Put it into the chat box on the GoToMeeting, and Catalina or Anne can take notes as I'm rambling on. Next slide. As you know, patient-reported outcomes may be collected by phone or online, in addition to the in-person collection system, if you happen to be doing that, or in addition to mail, which we've always had a process for. In terms of online collection, we now have a process where if you are talking to a patient and family, you can email them a link to the electronic version of the patient-reported outcome survey, and just ask the participant to record the study ID, the visit number. So you'll have to provide them the study ID and the visit number. Patients don't automatically know that. The coordinator has to supply patients with the study ID and the visit number. Most patients and families will know the current month and current year, and just have them indicate the option that they took the survey themselves. Alternatively, if you're a coordinator or a site PI or other clinical staff and you have the patient on the phone, you can go ahead and ask them the questions and click interview administered, and you can fill out the same link on the electronic Qualtrics survey. And again, if you want to do mail collection or in-person collection, that's always allowed. If you have a scanned PDF of the paper case report form and you want to email that into the CHOP coordinating center, they're still checking emails, and that's fine as well. And so we haven't changed the process for PRO collection. We've just expanded the process to give more flexibility to study teams as well as families during these next couple of months. Next slide, which I think may be the last. Questions. So we have about a minute for questions. You can put them into the chat box, unmute your mics. Otherwise, keep us posted. Let us know what's going on. Thanks, Shazad.
Thanks.
And we do recognize that many of you are uncommonly busy. Many of you have administrative or leadership roles in your programs. Many of you are getting called for other clinical duties or research duties. So thank you for doing everything you can to keep Combine afloat during these unpredictable and uncertain times. We've invested so much in this, and we're not going to let a lousy pandemic torpedo everything we've worked so hard to accomplish. All right, well, we'll end here and on time, but our doors virtually are always open, and please let us know what more we can be doing to support you and to support Combined Sites.